Hello, and welcome to KennyRoy.com. I'm Kenny Roy. This is the lecture for the month of April. Rapid fire questions 3. You asked for it. You asked for it, you will get it. This is sort of a ask and ye shall receive kind of situation going on here. If you haven't seen one of these before, what's going on with my camera? Why is my camera always so fuzzy? Focus, people. There we go. If you haven't seen one of these before, every once in a while I have a long backlog of Ask VideoMail questions, and I do want to eventually answer all of them. That would be kind of my dream. So that being the case, what I'm trying to do is every once in a while do a lecture. So every couple months or so. The last one I did was about 4 months ago. So every couple of months, get through as many Ask VideoMail questions as I can. Ones that are either too esoteric for an Ask VideoMail, or maybe too short an answer. And we'll just see how many we get through. Unlike other times when I've done this, I'm actually going to put the question on screen so you can see. And again, we'll just get through as many as we can, and this will be a super information-filled lecture. No demo this month, but also, just as good. So let's begin, shall we? First question. Here we go. Do you have some tips to take the experimentation you discussed in Maya towards the shooting reference stage? I think it's a great moment to try things out, but it's hard to really perceive what's going on until you watch yourself. That's true. If you watch the reference lecture, what I really kind of focus on is how much you actually can't try to control things as you are shooting a reference. Meaning, the more you try to get it, like if it's a dialogue shot, the more you're fighting to try to get that dialogue to be exact or whatever, the less natural, organic performance choices are just going to dawn on you. Because you're so focused, and we have a limited amount of focus, okay? But you're so focused on being, accurate to the sound file or the, the words themselves or whatever it is, that those natural occurring moments of brilliance, they will just be completely cut off, okay? That doesn't mean that you can't experiment and try to, do a little bit of kind of like accuracy at the same time. There's 2 stages to the reference. In my reference workflow lecture, I say there's 2 stages. The one is, let's say it's a dialogue shot, because that's normally the one that you're shooting the most reference, because performance choices are very specific. The first one is where you are performing the dialogue yourself, not playing it, okay? Not playing it, and not trying to lip sync it as it's playing especially, but saying the dialogue yourself. So if the line is, let's go to the park, whatever, you're just standing up and saying, let's go to the park. And you're whatever I just did, you're taking your reference from that. That's the one that you can experiment the most in, okay? The other phase of the reference is where you're playing the dialogue and you're just sort of letting the audio sort of like it rises and it falls, it's ebbs and flows, the energy that you're getting from it. You're just trying to like move yourself through the scene, and you're not trying to lip sync it. You're just letting how the dialogue that you're actually going to end up being married to and animating to, you're letting that energy sort of move you around. Experimentation with that is a little bit harder because you're taking something that has a very specific kind of like energy to it, and you're trying to build on top of it. So you can't go so far as to break away from that energy, otherwise your audience is not going to kind of like be on board for that. So I would say that experimentation in that first kind of phase is a lot more So that was a great question. Let me get the next one up. All right. All right, next up. How do you decide your very first approach to general timing of the main poses? Look at video reference, intuitive way by experience, stopwatch actions, just move keys around and play until things feel good. How do you decide your very first approach to the general timing of main poses? Well, that is kind of the idea. When I showed you guys the updated workflow checklist for timing or for tempo, first thing was the idea. And I think that when we get an idea, we see in our head. So I guess it's the second thing you said. Instead of video reference, it's intuitive way by experience. Your reference is going to come from your idea. So I would say that the more animation you do, the more you want to do something new every shot that you take on. And I'll tell you a little anecdote. When I was teaching at Animalia 2012, so this is 3 years ago, there was an animator who was working on her shot, and she brought the shot to over to my area and said, "I'm ready to block this thing. I have enough reference. I have my idea. What do you think of this?" And when I looked at it, I was like, "Well, this is good, except what my like if I was going to do this, like I would want to do a lot more." And remembering back when that happened, I think it's only because she had never animated anything like that before, and to her it was new and exciting and whatever. But I guess what if I had been given that shot, I would not have stopped my ideas at that moment. Not necessarily meaning that my idea was better, but that it was new to me. And so I guess what you need to do is to let your ideas kind of flow a little bit longer. There is a benefit. There's a known, well-documented, well-studied benefit to like thinking about doing stuff, basically visualizing the process. Okay, we can call it visualization because we are working in a very, very creative medium, a very creative visual medium, right? But scientists have known for years that in visualizing, you actually do get some, not a huge amount, but you do get a measurable amount of the practice that you need. So maybe one exercise you can do to get better or get to newer ideas for timing in the beginning of your shot quicker is to watch animation and then try to imagine, take the ideas further in your head. Try to imagine, how would I do this that would be, even more, newer, exciting, timing, whatever. There is something to be said about visualizing. So maybe make this a part of your animation training. There's so many things that I've recommended, and just trying to apply it to your animation learning process. I understand. Listen, I get it. It is tough to do all these things, but some of these things are really super simple, and this one is one that is so simple. If you're watching animation anyway, which you probably are, even if you're only watching the animations that are on the front page of KennyRoy.com and the blog, then you're watching at least one short film a day, right? So if you are watching animation, take 1 second, go back, watch one shot, and just imagine a different timing choice for it. Maybe not specifically performance choice, but timing choice. So if the boy gives the girl the flower, and in the performance choice is he's hesitant because he doesn't want to get his heart broken, and maybe in the short he just like hands it like that and he's looking all nervous. Maybe in yours he would and then give it, something like that. Totally same performance choice. He's scared, he's hesitant to give it to her. Maybe a little bit of a hitch in that movement is your idea, how you would have done that. Thinking about it is part of your training. Okay. It's been a long time since I was in a position where I kind of got caught off guard by a shot that was given to me. But no matter how good an animator you are, when you're given something new to do, your very first instincts are basically the judgment of your experience, right? So instincts need to be exercised as much as any other animation skill, right? Excuse me, pardon me. I still am kind of getting a little bit over this sickness. All right, here we go. Some of these questions, I said that the majority of these questions are, things that like wouldn't work as a VideoMail question, and that's not necessarily true. This one is, I think this would totally work as a VideoMail question, but I wanted to answer it in this context, so you'll see what I mean. I'm curious about the term blocking plus. I've seen many workflows that have a blocking plus phase, but what is done in that step differs for each animator. If it's an extension of the blocking step, why not merge with blocking? What is general workflow for blocking plus step that makes it different? Okay, so I wanted to answer this here because if you are familiar with tempo, then what you know is that in tempo, you are blocking when you are making the decision of what specific moments are important to your performance choice. Okay? So these are moments in time. All right? And they will be matched. Don't worry, they will be paired up with an appropriate pose. That'll come. But tempo really is based on that understanding and learning that understanding of what moments in the motion itself, what moments are going to actually, grip the audience, make them turn, make them, take a new direction, give them more understanding. Maybe put them on their heels, maybe take understanding away, whatever. So when you are making those decisions as to which moments are going to be the most important for giving the information to the audience, that's blocking. All right? When that process is done in tempo, that you are using normally a helper object or a very simple rig that sort of approximates the rig that you're going to use eventually. So what that means is that until you've made all the decisions of what those moments are, and until your helper object or your simple rig is hitting all those moments in very simple posing, okay, extremely simple posing, normally just for me, just positioning, okay? Remember that F-check trick that we saw where, like somebody like getting their head chopped off and then the head landing on the ground. Like it was just like this one like squiggly line, but it was done. That shot was done. if you had a rig in front of you, all you would have to do is just have that up and just put everything. Okay, yeah, it's all done. All those timing choices, everything perfectly clear after that. That was tempo. And remember, it's not necessarily a pencil test. It's not necessarily a 3D pencil test where your character is sort of roughly moving and whatever. It doesn't have to be your character. I've used everything from spheres to boxes to like copied and paste body parts, just try to get the feeling of the rises, bounces, and hits and pops and whatever of the performance. So anyway, but once you're done all of that, the nice thing about tempo is that you have to then get back out all of your reference video, all of your gathered reference. Okay, so reference video is what you shot, gathered reference like YouTube or Rhino House or whatever, and your thumbnails and boards if you have those, but all of this other materials that doesn't have any timing, doesn't have any influence on the moments that you've chosen. Actually, that's not true. I did in my workflow say that the reference video can be used. You bring it back out when you're retiming and experimenting in that blocking phase. But at any rate, then you bring in your real rig, and your real rig is going to have a little bit of an influence on like these moments that you've chosen. But at least you've chosen those moments and they're strong, and it was a deliberate choice. And your fight now is going to be to get the poses that you've chosen, these dream poses that you have, is going to be to get those into the timing that you've already chosen. All right. So, yeah. So basically, then you're in blocking plus, because then you're doing things like adding breakdowns and in-betweens. All right, breakdowns which are further refining and defining things like your arcs and the size of these movements and the speed of transitions and all these things. All right, so then you are in blocking plus. So, in tempo, the nice thing about it is that it has a clear mark where you're blocking or you're blocking plus. The thing that I don't like about other workflows is what you've pointed out here, is that it is almost completely nebulous, that the transition between phases is almost completely invisible. Okay. So I'm just really happy you asked this, because this was one of the benefits of tempo that I didn't really realize was there. But now that you've asked this question, I'm thinking that this is one of the strongest reasons to try tempo, is because when you're using other workflows or you've hobbed one together, you might always be thinking, well, what phase am I at? What stage is this shot? With tempo, there's no question what phase you are, ever, in your shot. Okay? Here's an interesting little quick question. Okay. How do you grow a pose or relax it? I got comments in an early stage of posing and not very clear on the meaning. How do you grow a pose or relax it? Well, basically what that means is making it stronger or softer. To grow a pose, what that means is to sort of develop into that pose even more. So it might not actually mean like making it bigger. Like, so if I am a strong man and I do a pose like this, like what it would mean is you would want to hit that pose and then really kind of like buckle into it, kind of like make it as strong as you possibly can. Things like getting as much sort of like rhythm in the silhouette as possible. So starting like out here and then really cranking it into and working in camera to try to make everything start as a sort of like, a strong pose, but maybe like crank into that silhouette to make everything like that much more iconic and symbolic, working with all the controls at your disposal. That would be growing the pose. It doesn't necessarily mean making it bigger. It could mean making it bigger, though. So if someone is, someone gets off a bus and someone, points a gun at him, and he goes like this, and then they go like that, they might go from this to, that would be growing that pose. It's the same pose. Essentially, it's the exact same pose, but actually, it would be funnier if they're... Normally, growing the pose is funnier the more subtle it is. So I'll back up so you can see the tops of my hands. But someone points the gun, and they're like this, and then they cock it, and they go from this to that. That would be growing the pose. But normally what I would say the rule of thumb is that you have to always be keeping a close eye on what you're doing elsewhere in your shot. Every single shot doesn't exist on its own in a film. Short film, TV commercial, whatever. Everything, the shots need to work together. But even within a shot, everything has to work together. So what I mean by that is if you are growing this pose from here to here, okay? Do you see how I did it? There was probably just a breath of anticipation down in my body, just a breath, and it shot up, and it didn't overshoot a lot either. It was very quick, wasn't it? Why I did it that way is because if you did it like this, from here to that would be bad. Here's why. Elsewhere in your shot, if everything the character is doing is 4-frame anticipation down, 6-frame movement, 2-frame overshoot, and then 3-frame settle, if you've got that formula set up, then you didn't grow the pose, you did an action. And your audience's eye, very astute, very, very observant. And we recognize patterns so well. Pattern recognition, strongest aspect of the human mind, okay? So that's going to not only tire out your audience's eye, but it's going to make your animation very, very dull, because everything is the same kind of everything occurs the same way. And that pattern is just being repeated, and it's going to get boring to watch. So there needs to be some thought put into how you are animating those kinds of things. So growing a pose. If I, get my bags and put them down, and then get my map out and look around, and then someone points a gun at me, and I see how I did a little bit of anticipation on that, and then they cock the gun, right? Contrast and delineating that just working within the pose. And that's another thing that is said. Growing a pose or relaxing a pose, another thing that we hear is work within the pose. Work that pose a little bit. Okay? So someone says, won't you come with us? Come on. Right? It's all the little things that you can do within that are not going to be full transitions, aren't going to be fully actualized in your animation workflow as stuff that needs to be anticipated or overshoot or any of these things. It's just within that pose, just kind of hit that note over and over again. Okay, which is its own form of contrast when you compare it to the rest of the shot. And relaxing a pose. Relaxing the pose, basically the same thing, except the opposite. So instead of making a pose stronger, it's sort of making a pose a little softer or a little weaker. All right. This is an interesting question. All right. How to make a good character vibration effect. Why is my Wacom thing popping up over and over? How do you make a good character vibration effect? Is there any workflow you follow, or is it just random keys here and there? Sometimes when I try to do that, it doesn't convince me. Character vibration effect. I'm assuming by what this animator means is an effect by which like the character is not like inorganically vibrating, they're actually organically vibrating. Meaning like they're not leaning up against like a car that's rumbling, you know, and wiggling. They're actually doing something where they're like, you know, getting so angry that they just start like wiggling. My advice for that is that you probably are seeing the effects of your timeline, the effects of Maya's 24 frame per second timeline. All right, here's why. If you animate, it's almost like, you know, animating keys on ones or twos or whatever. You're going to start hitting the limit of the animation process in general. So if you get down to it, animating even like on threes, although that would be a little slow for vibrating, but at any rate, the way I do this is I animate the character sort of moving like a little bit and get this all going, and then I turn off the keyframe snapping, and then I scale it down in the graph editor. If you use the region tool, it's probably the best tool to do this. Region tool, you just top left corner, you grab the keys you want, and it makes a box, and you grab the right handle of that box and drag it in, and those keys won't snap to any frames. And that is good because what you want is for that movement to actually be sped up movement and not keyed like on each frame, because then you'll get this like strobing effect where everything is kind of just like hitting extremes on those frames. Ostensibly, the camera isn't catching every little bit of vibration, and there's going to be a frame where, yeah, maybe it came to a stop and was changing directions, but then the next frame, it already has hit this extreme and is coming back, right? So it'll go from here to here, but it's not going this way, it's actually coming back this way. And then the next frame will be down here. So you wouldn't intuitively sort of animate those in-between moments if you were animating. And so what I think you're coming up against is that randomness is not actually all that random. It's not random in timing. It's just hitting perfect keyframes, and there's a limit to how much that really comes through, is what I would say. Just as a side note, one interesting thing that we're doing, if you have a Leap motion controller, one interesting thing that we're doing on our film Dog Eat Dog is we're adding a little bit of vibration, basically, to our cameras. Did my thing get out of focus yet again? Hold on a second. We're adding it using the Leap motion controller. Basically what we're doing is we're essentially mocapping our hands, and we're taking that resulting animation data and we're putting it on the cameras. So even when we're moving like a smooth camera, just how much my hand is moving right now, and I haven't had my coffee, so that's why it's kind of shaking. But just as much as my hand is moving right now, that can be felt just a little bit. So even if we have like a nice smooth camera move, you know, we're putting kind of a little bit of that human felt vibration on top of it. And I guarantee you, when the Leap motion controller, which is like $65 or $75 at Best Buy, it's really cool. But that controller, I can guarantee you, even though it's capturing, you know, once per frame, you know, if depending on which way it's moving, it's not keying it like, every single frame is an extreme, or even like a sort of like a local, I'm not sure what to call it, but when you're hand keying it and you're moving it all around, it's sort of like a local extreme. That's not white noise. That's different than white noise. As random as you try to make it, it actually is not white noise. I'd be interested to see what you're doing making characters vibrate as well. Depending on if it's a performance choice or whatever. It's a very interesting thing to have to animate. So I'd be interested to see what you're doing. All right, here we go. Okay, I know that a shot is dynamic and is more interesting when the movement is cut or it begins in the middle of a movement, but is it better to animate the whole shot from a moving hold to a moving hold to make sure the whole movement is more consistent and then cut? What do you think? So basically what this person is asking is, should you kind of animate movement at the beginning and the end of your shot, and then take your shot from, the you cut somewhere into the shot as your new starting point, and then cut out of that shot at the end? I would say no. I would say that's not a good use of your time, really. Because basically what this question sort of assumes, or the way that this question is phrased, is it kind of flips the process backwards. That moment that the camera cuts is chosen by the director and the editor, if they're not the same person, because we cut on action. The way that this question is phrased, and I know what you're going for, so it's not a stupid question, but the way that the question is phrased kind of insinuates that a shot is sort of on its own, and we, like, if you were told by the director, okay, now make him, turn and walk over here, that you would say to yourself, okay, well, I need to add some action at the beginning of this. But that's not how it works. The director is going to cut in the middle of the turn. It's going to be a wide shot. They're going to say, yeah, okay, I'll come with you, turn, and then cut. And then it's going to be a little bit tighter, and then they'll move the camera, and then they'll finish that turn and go, or whatever. You know what I mean? Tight to wide, wide to tight, doesn't matter. It depends on what you're doing here. But the point is that shot was chosen, that cut point was chosen because you always cut on action. That is why it's bad if you're doing animation for your demo reel to have a character completely standing still and then, fade up on this character or cut to this character, and then, they kind of come alive. Start doing something, and beep, 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 hello, okay, and then come to a stop, because it doesn't feel like you realize, that your shot is going to be, if they hire you, your work is going to be sandwiched, always sandwiched between other people's shots, right? It doesn't feel like you understand that you're always going to be animating the end of an action at the beginning of your shot, and you're going to never finish at least one action at the end of your shot. Now, you might have actions that begin and end within your shot, but you're always going to be finishing something, start poses right here. Got this down. Oh, God, cut. Right? That's what it's going to be every single time. So the point is that without movement, you don't just add movement and then all of a sudden your shot is more dynamic. Do something like design, but don't animate. Design and sort of plan out and think about the shot before and after your shot. Even if all you're doing is a shot that is like self-contained, like let's say you're doing an 11-second club entry. If you're doing an 11-second club entry and you have both characters start from a complete halt, then you've missed out on a huge amount of practice that you could have had. Figure out what was going on, and better yet, make your shot start right in the middle of some big action. That really shows a recruiter or a director or a supervisor, whoever's looking at your stuff, that really shows you understand what you are doing. Okay? So if the line is like, if the 11-second club line is like, well, I guess this is goodbye. Whatever. All right? Start it like I just did, like finishing picking that apple or getting that apple off the shelf. Right? So we cut. Well, I guess this is goodbye. And then cut. All right? But yeah, not adding a moving hold. It seems like a lot of wasted work to invent just like a little bit of movement, like sort of like vanilla movement that's not even really contributing to the scene at all. All right, this is a good one. All right. I often hear the term exaggerate your poses. And I try to exaggerate poses while keeping my animations looking realistic, but I feel like I'm doing something wrong. Do you have any tips on how to exaggerate poses while keeping it looking realistic? Exaggerate your poses. So this is different than growing or relaxing poses. This is different than that. What I feel like this is going to start dropping off, I think. If I have my way, I'm very seriously considering writing a book for my publisher, Focal Press, called Animating with Tempo. I'm very seriously considering it because I'm coming across more and more people who have the same, they think they have the same animation problems, but they have the same workflow problem. And it's advice like this, exaggerate your poses, that I think keeps them off of the right path. Okay? And then here's why. With the normal workflow, or the workflow that's kind of been in vogue for a while now, the task has been shoot some reference, gather some reference, draw some thumbnails, and then pose your character in those poses that you have with rough timing. And then people get the advice, because the animation doesn't look any good, which I argue is because of timing, but because the animation doesn't look any good, and things would always look better with stronger poses, and that's true, but they could then get the advice, oh, well, you know, strengthen these poses or exaggerate these poses. What exaggerating the pose does on top of weak timing is it sort of more clearly makes that moment in time that you've chosen, almost randomly, a moment as I call it. Okay, so that frame, let's not mix terms here. That frame becomes more of a moment if you exaggerate the pose, and it has to. Why? Because let's say the apex of a jump, right? If you're right here and your timing is wishy-washy, and then you turn into this, right? Well, this looks like way more of a moment than the other one did. There's a way to make sure it's a moment, which is tempo, which is the timing, but you can force something to be more of a moment. But then that introduces a whole set of new problems. And what those new problems are is you now have animation that really needs some help on the timing, but you have sort of shoehorned exaggerated poses on top of keys that you're going to struggle even more with than your weak poses to get the timing to work correctly. At least with the weak pose, it's kind of messed up that this is the way it is, and I'm realizing this as I'm saying it, but it's sort of the weak poses were almost better to hang on to while you were trying to suss out your timing and then strengthen the poses as a better workflow method than just following this advice to exaggerate your poses. Now, in terms of making it look realistic, I can take that two ways. The first is that you're pushing your poses so much so that they will make the frame that they're sitting on much more of a moment, that they're breaking the reality of the shot. So, for instance, if this was the apex of that jump and you pushed it to there, well, if he only jumps like this high, then it looks totally weird for him to get into, that crazy pose if it's only like a little hop. And that's another one of the problems, isn't it? So you can't just push and exaggerate on top of weak timing. So that's the first way I can answer it, is that you're actually betraying your performance choices, you're betraying the whole idea of the shot by exaggerating too much. And the second way I can answer it is if it's actually realistic animation you're going for, like a digital double, like a human character or an animal that's supposed to be realistic. And to that, I would almost give you the exact same answer, which is at least with tempo, you know that your timing is right and that the moments you've decided can shoulder the burden of any pose that you put on top of them. So you don't really have that problem with tempo. So this is very interesting. The more I talk about it and the more I see that tempo is a sort of like a universal answer to a lot of different questions, the more I'm thinking that I'm going to end up writing this book. So I don't know. It's encouraging, but it's also a little bit daunting. It's a little bit scary. But you know what? I really think that I'm probably going to end up doing this. All right, let's see this. All right. All right. I know that improving animation skills involves not only with animating a lot, which is obvious, but also with watching and analyzing motion and working on own storytelling or improv skills. How much should I animate and how much to analyze? What is more time consuming, more important to master my overall animation skills? I feel like I've answered something like this, and I'm only bringing this back up because of what I've already said today about visualizing your work. I found that when I was learning modeling, this is way back when. First thing I did, I had a 3D Studio R4, which was a DOS program. It was all typed in commands and channel boxes. There was no like manipulators or anything like that. It was very, very rudimentary. But I learned modeling in that. And I started looking at objects around me, and I thought to myself, like, how would I model that? Well, things that are obviously, shaped like primitives, super easy. But things that have a lot of complex, intricate detail, super hard. And I would spend time just like looking at stuff and polygon, like box modeling, hadn't been invented yet. So there was no like smoothing tools. There was no like, I don't even think they had any extrusion. You had to build things out of polygons and booleans. Anyway, so things like this, like almost impossible to create. But it still fascinates me that, how detailed some things would have to be in order for it to be even an approximation of the real world thing. Animation is almost like that times 1,000. Like, what is it about somebody falling one way that everyone will go, ooh, and falling another way, well, everyone will laugh? And, like, for instance, I just now saw on America's Funniest Videos, it was a clip from America's Funniest Videos on YouTube, or on Facebook, someone posted, which was Ice Bucket Challenge Fails. So that thing where you dump ice on your head to like raise awareness for ALS. Anyway, they had this silly music track over the whole thing, but that didn't matter. It didn't make me laugh at every single one. Half of these ice bucket fails were people dumping, trying to dump the full ice bucket on them, and like not realizing that like a bucket of ice weighs like 45 pounds and it slips out of their hands and the bucket hits the person in the head. And they had a laugh track and they had a goofy music behind it, but that didn't matter. Half of them were not funny at all. I was just like, ooh, oh, ah, like that. So what is it about but some of them were very funny. And some of the ones where it was, still a bucket falling on someone's head was very funny. So what is it about some of them that is that makes it funny and others aren't? It's 100 times more complicated than figuring out like how to make this out of primitive shapes. Is it one frame difference? I don't know. But those are good questions to ask. All right? So what this animator brought up is, how much time should I spend analyzing? All the time. Don't ever turn off your analysis. Every single time you chuckle, stop yourself and say, like, why is that funny? Why did that just make me laugh? Was it the speed? Like, what was it about it? It's funny when you have a moment with your friends. I remember when I was in college, I was at home visiting with my roommate, visiting my parents, and my dog saw my dad getting a dog bone, and we had a very slippery floor. And he was at the top we had 3 stairs down from our living room, to the front door, which is where the bones were kept. Anyway, so he was right at the top of those 3 stairs. When Dad gets a bone out, the dog tried to, in one motion, stand up and leap off of those stairs. But he was so, very bushy dog, a lot of hair, very slippery floor. He basically jumped and his feet didn't grip at all. So he just jumped and landed flat. Front paws forward, back paws back, flat on his belly, and then was like stunned for a second, and then slowly got up and went for the bone. My friend and I were canning ourselves. It was so funny to watch. And then and he's a motorhead, my friend. He fixes up cars, whatever. He said, "Oh my God, that was so low geared." And I immediately knew what he meant. Which is like in a car, your low gears, first and second, is where you have the most power, most torque, okay? but your RPMs are, you're trading in that top speed for the power, okay? Because your RPMs can't get too high, right? So basically, my dog's paws were like this super overpowered, like, motion that, like, there was no grip around. So, like, there was just too much power, and he didn't go anywhere. So when my pal said, "Oh my God, that was so low geared," I immediately got it, and that is what was funny about that moment. It was how, like, explosive that motion was, and then that splat and nothing happened. Hysterical. It's great when you have those moments around somebody else who can help you kind of point it out. But to kind of answer the question, I think a little bit more in the way that it was asked, how much time should you spend analyzing motion? I wouldn't ever, like, stop it. If you have time to animate. But I wouldn't stop to animating to say, like, oh, okay, now I'm going to do my motion analysis. There's plenty around you. There's plenty around you to, well, not in this office. That was kind of stupid for me to just, like, look around because I'm the only one here. But I don't ever turn it off and talk about it and analyze it. All right? Talk about it out loud. It's not annoying. Trust me, I've been married for almost 10 years. It's not annoying at all. I'm not sure how if my wife would agree, but there you go. Here's another one. All right. I really like the Anam because there's a strict start and end date. Oh, thank you. But when working on your own non-Anam Gym shots, how do you convince yourself to stick to a strict schedule so that you're not messing around with a particular shot forever? No shot is ever perfect, and people can keep giving you feedback upon feedback. It's hard to judge when you should decide to call a shot final and move on to the next shot. This is a great question because it kind of goes hand in hand with what I've always been advising for the Anam Gym, which is it's better to get a lot of practice doing little things and finish them than it is to work forever on, like, a big gigantic thing and only have one thing by the end. Okay, you can finish if you work at it and you get your workflow up to snuff. You can finish to your ability one Anam Gym shot a day. It is not that hard. All right, and if that seems daunting to you, then maybe you have a little ways to go. Okay, but that's okay too. Because you always did. And I do too. I've got a little ways to go too. Okay? But 2 to 3 seconds a day, not that hard. All right? So why am I saying that? Because in the span of 2 to 3 seconds of animation, you're probably only going to get to try out one sort of new thing or one idea or performance choice or whatever it is that shot has been put on earth to teach you. I've said that before, right? Figuring out why what am I going to learn from this shot? Let the shot tell it to you, okay? But the point is that in that short amount of time, you only have so much that you're going to get out of it. So I would turn this question around, sort of. Instead of saying, like, when is this shot done? When is this shot, done with me? Ask, or the other way around, sorry. Don't ask, when am I done with this shot? And base it on things like the more feedback you're getting and more that you think you can put into it or whatever. Ask yourself, when is this shot done with me? When is this shot, if every shot has a soul, when is this shot going to, go back up to heaven and say, I did good and, I taught Joe, exactly how much you can possibly push, anticipation when you're dealing with a shot where your character's back is turned towards you or something, right? Get that, by the way, get that specific with what you're trying to push in a shot. All right, you choose a staging where one character's turned away from you, and you're not getting any anticipation because you're shooting right down the pipe, right? If they're moving back and forth like that, you're not getting any anticipation. What do you have to do? I've said this before. You add a little bit of lateral movement just to give the audience's eye just something to see that is changing, something to track for that anticipation. Never directly back and forth, right? So imagine as you're working that shot is sitting there just waiting for you to get that and understand that. As soon as you've done enough experimentation, I don't know, 15, 20 different tiny little adjustments with tempo, hopefully, because it only will take you an hour or so to get 20 tries, okay? Working maybe with a dope sheet, maybe graph editor, maybe in panel, doesn't matter. But once you have gotten to that point and you imagine that shot's like, yes, he gets it, or she gets it. I'm going to, now the shot can die happy, knowing that you experimented on the amount of lateral motion you have to apply to the anticipation of a character whose back is turned to camera, or whatever. Then, just go through the last steps of your workflow. Don't work on a shot until you say to yourself, if I wanted to put more into this shot, I couldn't. I don't know what to put into this shot. Instead, say, I don't know what else I can get out of this shot. All right? Because you're doing it to learn. Some of these are going to turn out so good that they'll go on your demo reel. And more of them will turn out that good the more of them you do. The trap of working too long on a shot, especially something that's like about 3 seconds long, the trap of working too long on a shot is a very enticing trap. It gets the best of us, all right? But as you are working, you will improve quicker, which will in turn make it so that you're doing better work, which will in turn make it so that you have more to put on your demo reel. The sooner after that moment that you've learned everything you can from that shot, you stop. I know it seems a little bit weird. Stop earlier. Stop earlier, and you will get better, faster, and more satisfyingly, honestly, because, man, just seeing 1 or 2 frames tweaked on a video that someone's posted 10 times on Facebook just gets depressing for me. I can't imagine how they feel. It's like a day later and you've changed like 2 things. What were you doing? What were you doing? My Anim Gym people can change 15 things in as many minutes using tempo. What are you doing for a day that you're asking everyone on Facebook, is this better or is that better? I can't even tell. I don't even know. And you worked on 8 hours on this? God, you must be so demotivated. Okay? That person is so far past the point where the shot is done with them. It's not even funny. It's not even a joke by that point. It's just sad and scary how much time they're wasting, how much time they could be spending on a new shot getting better faster. Okay? So, yes, get feedback, and yes, work hard on your animation. But if you get to the point where you are saying to yourself, I don't know what else I can put into this, you don't know what else you can put into it. You don't. And that's because you haven't done enough shots to know what your limits are. And to push your limits, you need to know your limits. Okay? So the answer is stop working on it. Start a new shot, and on that new shot, you will know a lot better what else you can put into it. And when you get to the end, at that point on that one, don't try to put anything else into it. Start a new shot. Start a new shot. Start a new shot. Okay, very good question. I'm very happy you asked that one. That one probably could have gone into an Ask VideoMail, but alas, you guys got it here instead. I'm going to answer one more. I'm trying to find a goodie. I really like that. Hopefully you guys, I understand the Atom Gym is hard to commit to, but hopefully you'll try it once. Just once. Okay? Okay. All right. Oh, I wonder why this is all formatted weirdly. Anyway, when animating physical actions like running, parkour, fight scenes, would you use a layered approach like animating a sphere and parent constraining the body controls the sphere? So basically that's the helper object, right? How would you layer in acting into a physical shot? Would you use animation layers for that? So this is sort of like 4 questions in one. Actually, it's weird because it sort of uses a helper object, but not really. It kind of transitions back to layered approach. I'm going to simplify this question down to when to use a layered approach and when not to. The only time that I think now that a layered approach is demanded is when you're doing something that is almost cyclical and is a lot more subtle than any of these things, running, parkour, or fight scenes. Okay? A layered approach, or animation layers for that matter, in running, in not parkour or fight scenes, but like in running, is useful if you're having them do something on top of that running. So running and then turning and waving and then going back, sure, you can use animation layers for that or whatever. But I've found that the more physical a shot, the better tempo actually works. And how do you layer in acting into a physical shot? You don't. You don't. The performance is what drives those moments the most. Not even really the physicality of the shot. Okay? So that moment when the character, screams out that they love that person, right? That moment, you're probably going to want to have a very, very strong moment on the word love. I love you, right? And so what are you going to do? You're going to have them all bottled up, and they're going to take a step forward and say love, right? So your helper object would anticipate and then burst forward. And that position, that moment, that speed into that, the timing, would be the thing that you hope makes the audience feel that burst, that energy coming out of them. Okay? It doesn't matter if they're doing this after they were running and they come to a stop and then they say that. Because if you animate that running in a layered approach or however, and then have them stop and then step into that and then try to layer in that declaration on top of that step, you're going to have missed the opportunity of experimenting. What does it feel like? Right? We're going for feeling. What does it feel like to have that burst be 1 frame shorter? So like 1 frame faster. Or 3 frames slower. Okay? So there's an opportunity missed if you layer in performance. Performance drives the moments, and moments drive tempo. Copyright 2015. Thank you for all these questions. These questions obviously come from the VideoMail questions. Every couple of months, again, I will do a little bit of a dump of all these and let you guys get what you will from it. You know what? We discussed some things today that I are really making me feel like a tempo book is on the horizon. I mean, I've heard from other animators, I've heard from, heads of schools that they're afraid of saying that there's one way to animate, and I don't think that's right. You can obviously, I made a career out of animating the other way before, where it's all about pose, but that comes from the fact that back in the day, if you wanted to test your timing, you could flip it at your desk, or you could wait 2 days for them to shoot it onto film and then watch it back on a projector. If they had the capability to view timing the way we do now, I guarantee you it would have been a much larger part of the beginning workflow for the 9 old men. I promise you. Maybe not as big as I like to pretend, but I'm bigger. So I might write this book as a challenge to the industry. I might call it something like, animating with tempo, subtitle, the animation workflow, as a challenge to the industry to reevaluate how things are being done. We'll see. I appreciate your comments on that. If you want to discuss this in the forums, then use the link below. If you want to send me an email of encouragement or discouragement, I'll take both. I love talking to people, so any email that comes into my inbox, I just start jumping for joy. But this has been a lot of fun, very eye-opening for myself, and I hope for you too. That'll do it for today. I'm Kenny Roy. Good luck with your animation, and as always, rock on.